about how do we invest, even from the ground up, how do we invest in the people and the products and the innovation in our own products? And are we telling the right brand story? Are we educating the consumer on the product page or even on the packaging itself?
Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, a podcast featuring the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. Your host is John Giorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. For today's episode, John is joined by Chris Barnes, SVP of Corporate Development and Solutions Delivery at Syndigo. He and John discuss what brands are not taking advantage of or missing when it comes to digital content. They also discuss how Syndigo manages different types of content across channels and the future for digital experiences online. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
All right, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, it'd be great just to start out with a little bit about you and your history and what you're up to at Syndigo, and then maybe a little bit more about Syndigo and kind of where Syndigo sits in the market.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, so I've been at Syndigo for about 3.5, 4 years, part of the original management team that came over with our CEO, Paul Saleh, and I had actually worked with Paul quite a while beforehand in another organization in the industry. So we were doing promotional advertising, online pricing, digital shelf information, and brand protection, MAP as well too. So came from a lot of familiarity within the space. And, we said there are so many content providers out there when brands and retailers have to engage with each other for product information. There's just so many people out there. And we heard this need to say, can you guys consolidate that? And that was one of the things that we said, great, let's go find some of these companies out there. Can we go out and invest in one of those and then, build that as a foundation and try to figure out how to consolidate and collapse and kind of like take some of those hurdles out of the overall ecosystem. And so that was one of the initial missions that we came out with. And my role at Syndigo is more around how do we educate our clients and our prospects on what are the great solutions that Syndigo has to offer, but also listen actively back to them around where should we be investing in our time and efforts and solutions? What else are we missing in the equation? And so my role is kind of sitting between the product organization, our commercial organization, as well as our clients to kind of try to bridge all those together.
Got it. Okay, that's awesome. And tell our audience a little bit more, for those who aren't familiar, just kind of who is Syndigo? What are the capabilities today? What's kind of the value proposition for brands using the platform?
Yeah, so Syndigo is a private equity owned organization. So we're owned by the Jordan Company and as well as Summit Partners recently took an investment into us this past December. We're based in Chicago. We're global in about 16 different global offices. I use offices in quotes these days, right? But ultimately our vision and our overall mission is to enable commerce between brands and their trading partners, and that could be the likes of a distributor, a retailer, a hospital, a restaurant. Ultimately trying to kind of bridge that when they're trying to exchange product information, trying to make that really easy and try to efficiently help with that transfer of information. And again, that could be product information, nutritional data, digital assets, but we just knew that was a large challenge for them to exchange that. And we said, how do we try to make that better and give them one place to do that? But then also, how do they manage that information? How do they build upon that, store all that, distribute that out to all the parties, but then also understand, did that content have a strong effect on their overall sales? And so we figured out, how do we try to build out a solution and a platform that kind of enables one place that both brands and retailers or recipients can do all of that. And so that's kind of the overall mission of Syndigo today.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And we have a new partnership, which we're obviously excited about. I think, the kind of force multiplier effect especially across a more holistic e-commerce channel, when you're not just, focused on a single channel is really meaningful. So, when it comes to content, let's say not content is not the best word, but product data, let's say, is a little more expansive view. across e-commerce as a channel, I think the basics are understood. Like everyone listening to this knows that, you need to be accurate and consistent and all of those things. But, beyond maybe the basics, what are brands missing today? When you look at, what are 7 out of 10 brands still not kind of either fully taking advantage of or are missing?
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to tell brands that as much as they think their content is quote unquote healthy, it really isn't, right? And so that's a slippery slope, and sometimes we're walking on eggshells. But if you think about it, and it's crazy, some of the biggest brands out in the world there are still have a hard time gathering all that content in one place, right? It resides in so many different systems or internal different individuals own a part or a component of the overall content, right? You might have a regulatory and legal team that own ingredients and nutrition. You might have, the digital marketing team that owns how you want to describe that content. But when we look at across the board, the major things that we see a lot of people missing, it's simple things like imagery. Our imagery is missing, or it's outdated, it's old packaging, or we're not writing the content to really educate our customer or the potential customer on all the real benefits of our product, right? If we're looking at 2 different products side by side, how do we differentiate our product and show the customer really all the benefits of why they should buy us versus somebody else? So, images, that product information, and simple things like it's just not e-commerce ready. Like if you look at some of the content that we're given today, it's very robotic in the way that it's written, and that just does not translate very well to the e-commerce world. So those are some of the biggest things that we see as kind of pitfalls when we are kind of assessing our clients' content, that we say, like, those are the things that kind of rise to the surface. Now, there's other things too, right? A lot of people still miss nutrition. If we look at the food service business, nutrition is never there, right? If you look at home hardware, like we still see weights and dimensions wrong. Like people fat fingering 90-foot Christmas trees instead of a 9-foot Christmas tree. So that type of information is what we see the most common mistakes or issues in the content that we come across.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I assume part of this answer is, well, there's not a consistent kind of technological layer there, and I'm sure that's part of it. But are there any other kind of just legacy problems or anything that's leading to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple, right? One, a lot of these companies never had a devoted e-commerce, real devoted team. Certainly the last 15 months, everybody can say that was kind of a trigger for it. But even previous to that, there were still a lot of verticals that had never really sold online, or it was still kind of emerging. A great example is the alcohol beverage space, right? I think if you look at them 5 years ago, a lot of them would come to us and say, like, I don't even know how to sell to some of these e-commerce platforms, or my buyers and my merchandising teams at my given retailer, I have to engage with one person for in-store and another person for online, when in reality, like, you look at Walmart or Macy's or some of these other guys, like the 2 different merchandising organizations, 2 different types of content, 2 different types of people that were ingesting that. And so you had to write it 2 different types of ways. And, today we look at it as content should be content, and the purposes should be kind of consolidated at a given retailer. But again, a lot of people had never really invested into those roles at a lot of these brands.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked a little bit about just kind of quality of data, but what about consistency and the sort of consistent presence across the digital shelf? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it certainly goes to kind of what is the strategy that these brands want to have. There's certainly the strategy of, hey, we want to build that content once, and we want to have it across all our digital shelves at every single given endpoint, whether it's Walmart or Target or Home Depot or Lowe's. Like, we want that same consistent message. But then you also have to be very thoughtful about it too, and say, okay, well, maybe we need to build our content uniquely to the different types of customers and the different types of potential shoppers at a retailer. Like the shopper at a again, Walmart might be different than the shopper at an Amazon or different than the shopper, at a given marketplace. So we need to maybe be thoughtful about that. So when we think about the digital shelf, we're certainly thinking about, okay, are you really set up for success at that given retailer? Because we're not just talking about people coming through Google to find your product. We're thinking they're searching for your product or like-minded items like yours at a retailer. So are you understanding the dynamics of that shopper and the certainly how that shopper should be thinking? And so that's kind of what we're trying to tailor our thinking for our brands to say, are you really set up for success at every given retailers? And that digital shelf can be very unique across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, so there's obviously the kind of differences in shopper and shopper behavior, but there's also then the specific requirements of a given platform. How does Syndigo kind of manage that, and how do you think about that in terms of just the actual technical requirements of a given platform versus another?
Yeah, when we think about that, I think that's probably the biggest time suck for a lot of our brands, right? Oh my gosh, even if I sell across 3 channels or 3 different recipients or 3 retailers, like to understand all those differences on how I have to manage that content. A lot of the brands we work with today are sitting on spreadsheets, or they're getting it from their buyers, or they have to log into portals, and there's so many different things that they have to fill in, and it's unique across the board. Where Syndigo can really come into play is like we have those direct relationships with all those retailers, right? We're working with over 1,700 different retailers in some capacity that are engaging with Syndigo to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to start asking for this type of attribute from my supplier community now. Or, if you want to send a video to us today, you need to include a transcript of that content, and you can't have embedded images in the text, or like your character limit needs to be 50 instead of 35, or I want 3 images versus 1. And so that can be a very daunting task if you were selling to hundreds of different endpoints. And that's kind of what Syndigo puts back on our own shoulders and say, don't worry about that, brands. We will help you sort through all that, get your content 80 to 90% of the way there. And then maybe there's one-offs here and there that you might need to alter and change your content there. But that's kind of the education that we provide back to the brands.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's so important. I mean, it's hard enough to say, hey, this is the best kind of ideal state for content, but then when you layer in all of these other different restrictions that differ by platform and even sometimes by category, that adds a whole nother layer of kind of volatility and change and restriction into the strategy. So I think that's hugely important. Zooming out maybe a little bit, last year obviously was wild for lots of reasons, but in our industry, it was probably the biggest year of change in the history of e-commerce. What were some of the big changes that you saw? And this, go any direction you want here. If it's platform specific stuff, industry level stuff, internal changes you saw at CPGs. Just curious to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, I think Syndigo was set up quite a lot for success here. This was the first time in a while that since we had been investing ahead of the curve, we were already kind of trying to push some of these categories that didn't sell a whole lot online to already start thinking about that. So when they came to us and said, now we're thinking about this, we were like, okay, we've already got the playbook outlined for you, kind of how to do that and how to do it well. What I see kind of over the, and that was one kind of learning and lesson that we had. I think there's a lot of people that kind of realize, oh man, we never thought about the impact to our business, right? If people did not go to stores, how are they going to buy our product? And if people didn't go to stores, how are we going to make money? And so I think they were starting to think about, how do we invest even from the ground up? How do we invest in the people and the products and the innovation in our own products? And are we telling the right brand story? Are we educating the consumer on the product page or even on the packaging itself. And so those are simple, really blocking and tackling that we saw a lot of different industries, whether that's home improvement, since a lot of us were doing home improvement projects at our house, or, foods or allergens, right? Oh my gosh, this product has peanuts and we're not displaying that. Well, the mom can't go and read the ingredients right off the packaging anymore. So they got to figure that out in a better way. Or I need to search for a gluten-free product. Like, are we disclosing that? Are we missing out on sales opportunities? And so, as we think about the future of that, there are other categories and other industries that are going to start learning from the mistakes or some of the successes of these brands or even some of these retailers, right? Think about the auto space or think about the food service space. Like, they had to completely change their business model on top. People stopped going to restaurants and traveling, and like they had to figure out a better way. And so we're seeing things like marketplaces coming up, right? There's companies like Miracle out there that are doing unbelievable stuff in marketplaces, or dropship companies, and it's across all types of categories out there. And so we're starting to see more and more of that pop up. And I think a lot of these categories are going to start realizing, how do we try to replicate what maybe somebody in the alcohol space did, even though we're not even a CPG, or maybe what somebody in the home improvement space did and what somebody else in another category did. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that over the next couple months.
Yeah. I mean, do you think COVID changed the trajectory of e-commerce, or do you think it just basically accelerated what was kind of inevitable?
I think it opened up a lot more doors that people had originally closed really early, right? Maybe we'll get there in 5 years, but that door probably might never open. I think people kind of went from a no to, maybe that's something we'll at least entertain. So I think it gave people more of options. And then I think some of the
when you say you mean consumers. Like, the consumers were just, I'm gonna live the rest of my life never buying alcohol online, for example. All of a sudden, wait a minute, like, I could really use a drink and I can't go to a store. So,
I think it's both, John, to be honest with you. I think you're right. I think the shoppers certainly opened up the door, right? I think about my 68-year-old mom, right? She's never probably ever purchased anything on Instacart or online, but she was also in the high risk category. So she had to figure out how to even purchase products online and put them into a cart on Stop and Shop, right? And so I even had to do that myself.
Hey there, I'm Dave Zimmerman with Orca Pacific. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. We're a full-service agency exclusively focused on Amazon with capabilities for everything a brand needs to succeed on the platform. From advertising strategy, content development and SEO, to merchandising and marketing. If it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform, our dedicated teams are leaders in this space. Our robust suite of services includes expertise on the back end as well, from operational support, demand forecasting and planning, to the right fulfillment options, and higher level strategies like long-term planning, channel management, and access to beta programs. To learn more, visit our website at www.orcapac.com. That's ORCAPAC.com. And a business development manager will get you up to speed on how we can accelerate your Amazon business. Now, back to the show.
Chris, you were saying, did you see changes from more the industry side as well, and not just the consumer side?
Yeah, I think outside of just consumers, certainly the consumers had to change their behavior. And like you said, we had to change the way that they thought. But I do think on the business side, people were saying, now I need to think about alternate channels for me to get my product out, right? Okay, maybe we were always just traditional big box retailer. Do we do direct to consumer now? Do we how do we engage with marketplaces going forward? Do we have to look at our assortment? Do we have too many products, right? That's one thing that we've heard a lot about too, is this whole SKU rationalization. It was actually a very good kind of cleansing or spring cleaning for a lot of these brands that say maybe we have too many options, or we're giving too much selection to our consumers, or maybe there's an opportunity for us to do something unique, right? You look at guys like Boston Beer, lemonades and teas outside their traditional products, or see the snack companies that kind of flip their script too. So there was a lot of other opportunities where people opened up the door to new innovation and new product offerings.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, it's a good segue. Where do you see opportunity for retailers and brands to adapt to, like, if you're a CMO at a brand today and you're trying to look for sort of, the next thing or the next big opportunity, what are you looking at?
Certainly the types of experiences that the consumer is going to have with your brand or with the retailer directly, right? So how does a retailer or brand set themselves up for success? We look at the grocery space right now, and we still think we're in, and we always talk about baseball analogies or sports analogies in our office, but we still think we're in the early innings at traditional grocery retailers, right? If you look at them, not a whole lot of them have that same type of Amazon A+ content on their pages, right? So that's like a really easy win for a lot of these retailers to start engaging in that same light, right? We understand as consumers, as you and I both as consumers, John, like we buy with our eyes. We look at ratings or reviews. We look at how many images there are, or videos, or what is the great purpose of this product, and do I want to buy it? And not all retailers are there yet. And as brand owners, like you have an opportunity where most likely, if you go to your own brand direct-to-consumer site, you probably are sitting on some awesome imagery or content out there that you utilize for your social or your digital campaigns. Like, why aren't you having your retailers utilize that? And so, like, that's something really simple, but we also understand there's other types of content that is also coming in the fold. Like, we take a page right out of the consumer electronics page or the home hardware page where you can't go look and feel and touch those products as much anymore. So how are you bringing that experience into the retailer's pages? Are you turning that can to see actually what the back of that ingredients looks like, so you don't just have to zoom in? Do you want to see where that furniture is going to fit in your living room? Do you want to understand, how that Keurig machine would look like on your countertop? So there's a lot more of things like augmented reality, and that was a buzz term 2 years ago, but now it is reality, right? Yeah. So that is something that we see more and more, that experiential buying is coming across, and guys like Google and some of these big retailers are starting to really leverage that.
Yeah, where and this can be on whatever time horizon you want, but where do you see these kind of experiences and content going from a kind of incremental technology standpoint? I mean, I agree. I think AR is actually going to be really transformative to e-commerce once it gets good enough. I feel like we're just starting to see actually useful examples of it, where 2 years ago it was very kind of silly and gimmicky. Now it's actually like quasi useful in the right situation. I think we're still at the infancy. Anything else though that comes to mind in terms of just different mediums or formats for content?
Well, I think you also look at, I love how you said gimmicky, because like think about 2 years ago, people are like, oh, robots in stores, or using robots to package up products, and look at some of these big companies out there that are doing distribution and supply chain management right now, and now it's not gimmicky, it's find efficiencies in the business and saving them time and effort and money. And I still think there's a whole lot of room to be desired in last mile delivery. So many people have tried it. The biggest companies in the world, the Instacarts, the Ubers, like you mentioned, all those alcohol delivery companies of Drizzly and Saucy and Minibar and all these guys, like they've done a good job. But you know what? They're going to be pioneers in this space, and somebody else is going to say, I'm going to take that and build on it. And I think AR and VR for sure but I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to that is going to be just going to be the start of it. Somebody else is going to come out and figure out how to do it all together, or they're going to do it better. Look at Peapod. Peapod has been around for like 25 years. They were selling groceries online in the early 90s. But, and then all these other companies said, oh, yeah, consumer does want to be a little bit lazier. They want that convenience of having it delivered to them. what else can be delivered to us now too? So I think some of those other type of convenience factors and then just education of products is going to be where the industry is headed to, John.
Yeah, cool. Chris, this has been great. How do people find out more about Syndigo? How do they connect with you directly?
Yeah. So Syndigo, just Syndigo, syndigo.com. Again, you can use the contact us form. You can also reach out to me just at chris.barnes@Syndigo. Another great way to engage with us is just on LinkedIn. We've actually got a very strong LinkedIn following now where we put a lot of thought leadership out there too around all the great things that we're doing, some case studies and just different solutions around the applicability within the industry and our industry involvement. We're trying to be very active in that industry. So those are great ways to engage with us.
Awesome. That's great. Chris, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, appreciate you hosting me. Appreciate the time.